thinking, and some people who are not here may be thinking, why is the Climate Science Center hosting a seminar on spirituality? This idea actually came out of a panel that was hosted by the English department a couple of months ago, but I think it fits perfectly with what we do. So I am a scientist, and as a scientist, I'm conscious of the limits to science. I study climate change, which is one of the most polarized and also one of the most pressing challenges that we face today. And I know that the science can tell us very clearly that climate is changing. It isn't just a matter of thermometers and satellite records. There are 26,500 natural indicators of a changing climate around the world, including the peach tree that used to grow in John Zach's backyard for 30 years, which when he cut it down was blooming how many weeks earlier a year?
4 weeks.
4 weeks earlier a year. And this year probably would have bloomed, I don't know what, 6 or 8 weeks earlier if it's still been around. So science can tell us clearly that the planet is warming. And science can also tell us why. It's been over 160 years since scientists first figured out that burning coal and oil and gas produces carbon dioxide, which wraps an extra blanket around the Earth that traps more heat. It's been 160 years, which is pretty crazy. And in those 160 years, we've also looked at natural cycles, orbital cycles, volcanic eruptions, changes in energy from the sun. We've looked at all the other causes, and we've discovered that if the planet were being controlled by natural factors right now, we'd be getting cooler, not warmer. Science can also tell us, and this is where my own research comes in, science can tell us what are the outcomes of the choices that we make today. So if we continue to depend on coal and oil and gas as our primary source of energy, and if we encourage the billion people in the world who are currently living in energy poverty to depend on those same fossil fuel resources as they develop, we know what the world will look like. It will look like a world that we have not seen as long as there's been humans on this planet. We have never seen a world that would face those conditions. My research also shows that if we can continue the transition that we are already on today to clean energy, wind and solar, as well as other alternatives like tidal and even nuclear, if we continue that transition today, the world will still look different than it is today, but not that much different, and we will be able to adapt much more easily. And science also tells us that that transition is already underway. And this is some of the coolest stuff, is looking at the fact that China is leading the way in decarbonization. They are shutting down coal plants. They have built more wind and solar energy than any other country in the world. In the next 3 years, they're investing $360 billion in the clean energy industry to create 13 million jobs. Whereas in the United States, they're investing money in the coal industry to try to create more jobs in an industry where jobs have been falling like a rock for the past 10 years, not because of any climate action, but simply because it isn't the most affordable or the smartest way to get our energy anymore. And today in the US, there's 2 times more jobs in the solar industry than there are in the coal industry already. And it's growing very quickly. In fact, the fastest growing job in the US right now is wind energy technician. That is the fastest growing job in any sector across the whole US. So that's what science can tell us. That it's real, it's us, the impacts are serious, but there are solutions. So you might say, well, isn't that enough? Why do we need any more? It's because we're humans, we're not robots. And when provided with the facts, 2 people who are provided with the same facts and agree with those same facts could come to completely different conclusions about what to do about it. Because there is no one-size-fits-all solution to this issue. Here in the United States, over 70% of people identify as Christian, and over 85% of people identify as belonging to a specific religion. Around the world, total numbers are about the same. Over 85% of people around the world belong to a specific religion or spiritual tradition. And when we're confronted with a set of facts and we have to make difficult decisions about those facts, our decision is going to be influenced either consciously or subconsciously by our values. And for many of us, our values come from our faith, our tradition, and our culture. Back, in the post-World War II era, in the 50s and 60s, there was a kind of a myth that scientists could be robots, that scientists could be completely impartial, that we could be completely unbiased, and that we could just make completely objective decisions. And I think one of the biggest things science has learned in the past 10 to 20 years is that is a complete myth. Why? Because we're humans. We are influenced, whether consciously or subconsciously, by our surroundings, our culture, and our faith. Another myth that many of us have bought into is that scientists are predominantly atheist. So there's a woman at Rice University called Elaine Eklund who's done fascinating research on scientists to show that the majority of scientists, about 75% of scientists, view themselves as having some type of spirituality, as that there is more to the life in the world than just science. So where does this intersect with climate science? It intersects because we're faced with this huge problem with massive inequities, massive injustices, big choices that have to be made, where there are going to be some losers no matter what choice we make. How can we guide ourselves forward? And for me, one of the biggest reasons that I study what I study is because I believe that we are here to take responsibility for this planet that we live on, and we are here to care for those who are less fortunate than us. And today, climate change is impacting those who are less fortunate than we are. And so when I take the facts of science to make a decision with those, one of the frames I use very deliberately and consciously is, who will this help? Will it help to lift up the people who are already in need, who are already in poverty, who are already lacking, and who don't have a voice? That's the frame I use to look at the solutions that I support. And I think it's important to do that consciously, because if we don't do it consciously, we'll be doing it subconsciously. If we try to pretend to ourselves that we are completely unbiased, completely objective, guess what? We're going to end up making completely biased and completely unobjective decisions. That's why I think it's so important to talk about things like this, and that's why I'm so grateful that we have our fellow panelists here to dig a little bit more deeply into this issue of what do we believe and how can we use what we believe as a foundation to make good decisions that are informed by science but are consistent with our values, because we all have those values, every single one of us.